go further with the next presenter, who is Professor Erik Dahlqvist from Mälardalen University. So Erik will talk about how to speed renewable increases up. So the floor is yours.
So, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The title of the presentation was, we made it, it was a very rough thing. What I am going to talk is how can we enhance the use of renewable energy and how to decrease the use of fossil fuels. So the title was a bit difficult to understand, I think. What I will start with is looking for what has been the situation in Sweden for the last 70 years, and if we try to predict what will be the future 70 years, you can see very rough figures. These are not exact figures, but you can see that after the war, during the World War, Second World War, we had an embargo in Sweden, so we had principally no fossil fuels, so we had to turn into biomass. Then after the war, oil was flowing in and biomass was replaced by oil primarily. So we had, during around 1970, we had 2/3 of all primary energy was oil. But a decision was made to go for nuclear power because we didn't want to be dependent on importing fossil fuels. So from around 1970 to 1980, we had a huge increase in nuclear power when we started up 12 power plants. At the same time, this was replacing oil. So the oil has been going down ever since, principally in Sweden. And now we have also increased the biomass during the 80th, 90th, especially during the 90th, and then onward. So today we have more terawatt hours biomass use than we have the total of fossil fuels. Hydropower was coming a bit also before that. And what we're seeing now is how wind power is really going up very rapidly the last 10 years especially. And I would say that solar power will come very soon also. If we then look at the use of the energy, we can see that energy for heating buildings is going down. We're having much better insulation and much better technology. Electricity is going up. We are replacing fossil fuels with electricity primarily. And what we are seeing now is transition when it comes to industry. We have almost no fossil fuels is used at all in heating and electricity production in Sweden. But what we can see is we have had a number of crises. Oil crisis, 1973, we had 11th of September crisis, we had financial crisis, and now the COVID crisis. And what we have seen is that these different crises has showed some small impact when it comes to different patterns like traveling and those type of things in industry use and so on of energy, but it's been quite short term. The long-term trends still have been there all the time. So if we can get the long-term trends to move, the short-term things really are not affecting so much. What we can see now is we're expecting we have batteries coming up, we have fuel cells, and we have very much more electricity export import. We are communicating between the different countries and the different regions very much, and this is a very strong trend. If we just look at some of the figures we have, I just want to show here that if we have the impact of what is the power capacity in gigawatt, if we look at the column far to the right there, we can see that hydropower, we had 1,300 gigawatt, we had solar power 630, wind power 650 last year. And these together is significantly more than the installed capacity for coal. Still we have natural gas is increasing, but coal is actually going down. So we are seeing a trend here where coal power plants are, even if there's still a number being built, a lot are also being closed. So if we look at transportation then, the biggest issue I would say is transportation, and this has been impacted a lot by COVID. COVID has caused a reduction in person transports, We are not allowed to transport ourselves for vacation and so on. But at the same time, we have seen a very strong increase in internet shopping, I think, in many countries. And this is increasing the transport of goods, especially locally, where we earlier had the transport of goods to big centers. We are now sending it directly towards the customers. So what could we see then replacing this? Yes, 3D printing locally. I would say I think that will be the new thing to look for. How can we have printers where we can produce whatever we want? Instead of buying it from the internet, we are buying a drawing and then we print it ourselves in our own local printers. When it comes to person transport, especially business transport, we can see new tools are coming up. We have holograms, we have augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, all those type of things can really replace a lot of the travel, especially when it comes to conference travels like the one we have now. Instead of being in Bangkok, we are sitting in our homes. That of course is very important. And this COVID is really driving this. And I was talking about the short-term things have been not giving very much impact, but COVID is not a short-term thing. It's we're talking about 1 or 2 years now. So I think it can really give us some new ways of working and implementing a lot of things. So during the 40th and 50th, we went from wood to oil. What is happening now is we're going back to use wood and cellulose chemistry for a lot of new type of things. It will be the basics for production of plastics. It will be used in vehicle fuels, and it will be used in a lot of different type of things. I think that is a trend we will see very much more of. Steel industry, we're talking about industry. We just heard a few days ago here about the Swedish news that LKAB, which is, they are producing roughly 90% of the virgin iron produced in Europe. And they are now transferring a lot of their activities from using fossil fuels to using hydrogen, and the hydrogen will be produced from hydropower and wind power in northern part of Sweden. So this is a way we can see how industry is really driving these type of things towards renewables. And today, if we are looking at big investors, the big investors, they want to go for renewables. We can see Statoil, the Norwegian oil company. They now have started Equinor, and Equinor, they are doing one of the big drivers for building wind power plants offshore and so on. And we can see there is a very strong trend in industry to go for renewables. And investors, they want to invest in industries that are driving these type of things. Animal production is another activity that is, if we look at how many people and how many tons we have of humans, animals, and domestic animals and wild animals and insects, we can see it's enormous amount, but we can see that the wild animals are very few in relation to the others in tons. What we can see is it consumes roughly 70% of the crop production is used for our domestic animals. In the US, I saw some figures that the cats and dogs correspond in meat consumption to 75 million people in the US. And we have a similar situation in many other countries, of course. So we could see that we should eat more crops, minimize waste, because a lot of the food we are bringing to our homes is wasted. We could look for the possibility to remove the methane produced by the cows, and we could use it in CHP plants instead. But we also can see this COVID has raised a new issue, and that is animals is a risk for new pandemics. So we have to address that. And I think we haven't really thought too much about it so far, but we will have to do it. So what could we do then from governmental perspective? Yes, we have a lot of different type of mechanisms. We have green electricity market with the market deciding both price and quantity. We have feed-in tariffs and fixed price, where the government is setting the price and the market should drive the volumes. We have different type of quoting systems like CO2 emission rights. We have green electricity certificates where each customer is paying a certain part of the electricity fee to the company so that the company should use this money to invest in new electrical production capabilities. And we can see it's been very successful in Sweden and Norway, where we have really gone dramatically up in wind power in this case. So COVID-19 perhaps doesn't impact these things directly, but we're starting huge programs in all the big economies. And if the politicians, they take the opportunity to really use these different type of mechanisms to drive the renewable energy, then we can get a strong impact. So what the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is it's a possibility, or it is possible to get strong actions in most countries if you just are motivated. But the politicians need to see that it's beneficial for them to do these activities. So it doesn't matter where you are, everyone is looking at what do my bases want to have. Industries, they are driving very strongly. And in Rio 1992, they started this activity, Business Council for Sustainable Development, down in Geneva. And their industries really have been pushing new technologies to go into renewable systems in many ways. And the United Nations is trying to drive, but we need to see that everyone wants to go this direction. So the summary is a need for political decisions to drive this at all levels and in all countries. But we have the obstacles, and that is blaming uncertainties. Do we really need to do this? Can we afford it? And prioritization of other things. We want to defeat the poverty, unemployment, and we want to fight pandemics. But what we have to see is that these things all are integrated, and we can't come around doing anything against these climatical and other type of biological aspects. So if we don't do anything, that is also a very active decision. So that was my final slide here, Eva.
Thank you, Erik.